So we have the microphone, so our guests on the call can join us. We all need to use, when we hit it, you just hit it and it turns red, not green. Red means it's on. And then you can please turn it off and you're finished. The first thing I just want to order, we have to do our little thing. I have determined that there is a quorum here in the room for my script. And a couple things. Good morning, everybody. I'm Carrie Wilson, your chair. Just to let you know that both Rip Sullivan and Joe Bay are out. They have celebrating the weddings of their children, which is wonderful. So excited about. And other people have some special news. Cookie's going to be a grandmother. So we're so happy. And there's no stopping Marlene. Welcome, Marlene. We're so glad you're doing okay. And as you all know, first before we get started, I want to conduct this meeting virtually in accordance with Fairfax County Boards, Authorities, and Commissions remote participation policy. We need to take a roll call and verify that our remote participant voices are clear and audible. To do so, I will conduct a roll call on those AHAC members on the virtual call. When your name is called, will you please state your name and your call-in location for remote participation? And I see AJ.
Yes, AJ Zaman is present from home office.
Thank you. Eleanor Vincent.
Good morning, Eleanor Vincent. I'm calling from Montgomery Village in Maryland.
Carrie Kincannon.
Carrie Kincannon. I'm actually calling from the Eastern Shore of Maryland. I'm from the Mount Vernon district.
Take cover. Sarah D'Souza.
Hi, this is Sarah, and I'm calling from Reston on my way to you guys.
And then we have, are there any other AHAC members on the phone? I believe we have Syed Ahmed, who is representing Abar Amish this morning.
Good morning, and thank you for the welcome.
And Bree Fuller is on the line. Okay.
Good morning. Good morning. Just want to verify, not from home for sure, but Chantilly, Centerville District, Fairfax. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. With that, I would like to move that the voices of all AHAC members participating remotely are clear, audible, and can be adequately heard in accordance with BAC policy for remote meeting participation. Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Jerry. All in favor, agreed? Aye. Concerns. So thank you all for joining us, and we can move to the next slide. I wanted to just note we're going to go around the room very quickly because we do have some new members here today. It's really exciting for our first full meeting of the new fiscal year. So what I'd like to do is just quickly go around the room and introduce yourself and the district or BAC that you're representing. And I'm going to start with Jill.
Jill Norcross with the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance. Norman McAfee with Wesley Housing.
Carl Williams with Emerson's.
Paul Zdrowski, Springfield District.
Jeremy Allen, Mason District Representative.
I'm Mary Fairfax, an AACP representative.
Joe Monroe, Province District Representative.
Good morning, Josh Shoemaker with the Fairfax County Human Rights Commission.
Morning, Tom Fleetwood, Director of the Department of Housing.
Terry Wilson at large.
David Van Den, Department of Housing. Malia Strobel, Housing and Community Development.
Ryan Sheriff. Ryan Sheriff, representative for financial institutions.
Sherry Zamero, Community Action Advisory Board.
Gary Koji, Human Services Council.
Cookie Blitz, Disability Services Board. Marlene Blumhair, Healthcare Advisory Board.
Tara Ruskowski, a community representative from the Land Center.
Ingram Land from the Virginia Association of Realtors.
Morning, Nick Bracco with Lincoln Avenue Community for Profit Rules.
I'm glad to see that Sarah has magically gone from screen to table.
Boy, that was quick.
A little while to find time for sure.
So, if we could, we did hear a few new members. I'd like to just invite our newest members. I wanted to let you know that between our last meeting, Ken McMillan did tender his resignation from the CAB. You all know Ken, he's still active. I think we got an email from him at, after midnight last night, so he's still going to be a great supporter. But Sherry, can I start with you just to introduce yourself and you are taking this?
Sure, Community Action Advisory Board for a number of years, and I just was saying to Jerry, I didn't intend for this to be my passion. A number of years ago, one of our members in Leafield made a impassioned plea at our meeting because she was about to lose. I walked up on my porch that night, I said to myself, oh my God, I have a home. And it just, since then, it's just inflamed me. And so I just want to be here to learn as well as to hopefully make a difference.
Welcome. Congrats.
Morning, everybody. I'm Ryan Sheriff. I'm with Freddie Mac Targeted Affordable Housing Multifamily. Prior to that, I was actually the Director of Real Estate Finance and Grants Management here at Fairfax County, DHCD, FCRHA. So it's great to be back in this room right now. I've served all of my postgraduate career in affordable housing, mainly focusing on affordable housing finance. Although it was sad to leave the county, in fact, Freddie Mac, I was extremely excited to be back to be able to contribute and help promote more affordable housing community by joining AHAC. So great to be back here working with a lot of familiar faces and looking to contribute and provide knowledge and experience from many financial institutions I've worked for in my career. And so thanks. Great to be here.
Josh.
Hi, good morning again. I'm Josh Shoemaker. As I mentioned, I'm the president for the Human Rights Commission. I'm taking over for Eduardo Conde, who had to step down for other obligations, and he put a bug in my ear and said, hey, who wants to step up and serve? And I was enthusiastic about the opportunity. I am in Frank County District, Frank County District resident, so barely over the line there in Fairfax County. And my kind of day job is I work for the Council of State Community Development Agencies, which represents Virginia Housing and Community Development. And I lead government affairs there at the federal level, so work very closely with HUD and other partners who are engaged across housing, homelessness, disaster recovery, and community development. So I look forward to this important work, and I've already worked with Tom's son and his team on we have some great affordable housing development going on Richmond Highway, and had a chance to bring HUD down and show off that good work earlier this year. So look forward to getting there, everybody.
Thank you.
Jeremy.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Again, I'm Jeremy Allen, Mason District's new representative to the council. I recently ran for Mason District Supervisor in the Democratic primary in June. I was appointed by Supervisor Brooks after the election to the council. I recently also worked for Congressman Van Buyer, covering Fairfax County and Falls Church, and handling a lot of the different housing issues that we have, as well as a lot of legislative issues. Fun fact, my wife and I bought our first home through the Fairfax County Workforce Dwelling Unit Program. So I have a lot of experience of what it looks like to be on the other side. And so I'm very excited to share it as I can and also learn from you all and the good work you're doing. Thanks so much.
Thank you. And Ray McGrath, I'm sorry I missed. Both Sherry and Ray are going to be officially voted in on Tuesday by the Board of Supervisors. But Ray is here as a member from the Advisory Social Services Board, I think replacing Alice. Yes. Ray, welcome. You want to?
Thanks for the welcome. Yeah, hopefully I'll get only appointed on Tuesday.
Depends on how it goes today.
Yeah, I'm sweating. Alice was a great advocate for what you all are doing. And this past calendar year, 2022, primarily thanks to Alice's input, the major focus of the Advisory Social Services Board was affordable housing and the impact that it has, the availability of it on the needs of the community to draw on the other opportunities and services that the Department of Family Services provides. So I'm happy to pick it up, hopefully, and learn from you all. I live in Mount Vernon District. Have lived in Fairfax County since 1991 when I got in the States. I'm a retired Forest Service officer. I know that Dan Stork. I'm not trying to working on Terry's role here at all. But I hope to be an advocate for not only Social Services Board, but also for my home district to the extent that it's useful to be so. I know that Dan Stork is concerned about this. He's concerned about the potential gentrification or real gentrification of the Rutland corridor. And so, thanks a lot.
Thank you. That's terrific, and it's great. Really exciting to have such wonderful new members joining this council, and that really is, I just want to mention before we get into announcements in our business, just a huge thanks to Tom and Megan and Malia who, stay in touch and work with the clerk and have been very clear. We've really been communicating, the work of this and really asking people to identify those folks that really can come and make a difference. So we're so glad to have you there. Malia, if you could move forward, we're going to go do something a little different. And first of all, and it goes back to my apologies for not getting the agenda materials out to you earlier. And for those online, I will say that it's just been incredibly busy doing the business of homelessness. So we're trying to, housing. I do some other stuff. Sorry. And the staff have been hugely busy, as you're going to see. So I just wanted to quickly give a couple of updates on things that have been happening since our last meeting. I would note that at our June meeting, we heard, and I think even at March, we heard the report of the changes. The COC is moving, the work of the COC will move to a new homeless governing board. And hopefully you all saw the notice that former City Mayor David Meyer has been appointed to lead that group. It's wonderful. Ara certainly and have been working. Many of you have worked with him, and he's just terrific. So I think going from the former mayor, Mike O'Reilly in Herndon, and the new iteration to David will be great. A number of you will continue to work with that, and I know Tom Barnett that you all are continuing to work for other members who will be presented to be appointed. Maura Williams will continue to represent AHAC on the COC and be one of the members that will serve on that board and bring updates back here. So that's great. On your behalf, I was invited to participate in focus groups that the county was doing to understand how boards, authorities, commissions are working, and more important, how we are doing work with sort of a lens of One Fairfax in mind. And I believe that Marlene, there are probably a couple other of you were able to participate in those. I think I found it, I just wanted to share with you that it was a great meeting. They mixed people up from different BACs, and the kinds of things that came up almost immediately were the questions that we have raised about, accessibility, the joy of being able to have people participate virtually, which has been the only benefit coming out of COVID, but then the challenge of ensuring that participation can be two-way and can be active. It's a way to get people involved. So everybody around the table talked about that and the importance and, the county moving forward on that and commending them to try and get this kind of work. We talked a lot about other actions, which is hearing different boards, and it became very clear to me that we are special. We are one of the few BACs that has not just supervisor appointed members, but BAC appointed members and director appointed members. So it makes for fun, but it also brought up for us the importance of how we're working with the BACs. And so I know that there'll be a report coming out, but there were a lot of conversation about the work, and I really enjoyed doing it. So thanks for asking me. At our last meeting, we presented the revised charter. The executive committee has approved that. The major change was to reflect the fact that the COC work is moving to the COC board, the new governing board. Homelessness and its intersection with housing still remains very much a part of this agenda. At our next meeting, we will also approve revised bylaws, which sort of go along with the charter and just serve as the operating piece for our committee. And then finally, we have either as co-chairs or officially through other members, AHAC has been very active again since our last meeting, comments on the preservation draft, the legislative program, fair housing implementation. So I just want to acknowledge that we've been out there more. Go to the next slide. Wanted to have a few minutes for some member updates. We just quickly, some things that have come up and these are members of this committee who've been working on things. Sarah, can you give a brief update on Bush in the Woods?
We partnered with the First Baptist Church, and then we are allowed to get to join us. They were actually at the tent encampment, and we had different faith communities. Is that better?
Just move it closer.
Is that better? Yeah. We had several faith community leaders join us in worship actually at the tent encampments in Reston, and then followed by a luncheon and Supervisor Walters Government Center conference room. And we broke up into little groups and discussed some questions that were given to us to share. One of them happens to be the form, the intake form that everyone is requested to fill in when they come into homeless services. And I know Tom Barnett is working on updating the form, so already they're seeing a difference. And we had 3 of our neighbors in tents actually give testimony and share their stories. I think Carrie and Jerry can talk about the impact that had. To realize that these are regular folks, some with full-time jobs, and their challenges when they're living in a tent.
Thank you, Sarah. And it was a great meeting and sort of bringing it to attention some of our issues. It's not working. Okay, great, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks, Nick. The county, as you all know, promulgated emergency response, updated a policy that has been in place to make sure during the extreme weather conditions that our public buildings, communities were available to help people, certainly thinking as well about those who are housed, but also may, have issues, need help with their utilities. I know that NAACP, I don't know who wants to speak. Mary, can you give a brief update on sort of work that you did?
Yeah, Tom started over.
Here's your mic. Thank you.
Yeah, can you hear me?
No, push the button.
Yeah? Okay, then here you go. Okay. So Tom Barnett set up a working group at the county level to develop this pilot project for this summer that gave people more information about where to go when it's cool, that brought some cooling relief supplies to different drop-in centers and shelters. And NACP took on doing a survey of homeless people in July, just shortly after this program started, to see if they were getting information about it, to see if they were benefiting from it. And we completed that survey. We presented it at the working group last week, and I gave Carrie a copy of it to send around to all you folks. Basically, what we found is that homeless people want more water, more ice water. They want cold things to drink, and they have trouble coming up with that. And that's the same thing they said last year. That's true. That's what they keep saying. They also want a place to sleep indoors if they can. Many of them want that. Some of them are happy camping, but they would like a bathroom and a shower. Others would love to have a place indoors to stay, whether it's temporary or permanent. Yes, a lot of them, a lot of them want permanent housing. We also asked them about their health conditions and their age. And we did find that about a third of them were over 65, and that most of them thought they were in pretty good health, but quite a few were in poor health. And we really think that there should be some sort of special consideration given to finding those people and really giving some more support to them specifically. So we turn them over to Marlene and her healthcare advisory board to pursue. So we're hoping we can continue and build this program. I think it's a good start, but that, we can go further with it to give relief to people out there. Because we also kind of recommend we might lower the 105 heat index to something that's more consistent with other jurisdictions in this area, which is like 90, 95. So
thanks so much, and for those that worked on that, and really to the county team as well. I know that organizations that are involved on the side of providing that certainly move much quicker than a 95 to 105 degree, and that's open, but it's really important to stay that. So
I was just mention too that 18 volunteers working on this and 62 homeless people interviewed, and people were very enthusiastic, the volunteers. It was just a great project. People loved going out to the drop-in centers and conversing with the homeless people there.
Thanks, Tara.
I just want to thank Mary. This doesn't happen without somebody really pushing it. And oh, thank you. So that's what you're saying. I just wanted to thank you, Mary. This doesn't happen without somebody just being tough. And you were, and you pushed, and created valid, important information. It's helping us understand and also share out the news of our population. But kudos to you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And then lastly, I had the opportunity this week because another guest canceled. It's the only reason. The county executive asked that I join him on a podcast that he has. I don't think it's been published yet, but it was interesting. He said I was the first person that emailed him as a new county exec, and it was about affordable housing. And other than Jerry Poggi, I'm one of the most frequent communicators. So
I apologize.
I know, really.
Jerry got some band
Jerry, everybody else. But
Apparently a fan of yours now. Wow.
It was a great opportunity to talk about the work that's been done in partnership and of course our care for housing. So if you get a chance to check it out or don't, I don't know how bad it was, but Marlene.
Just a brief announcement, on October 10th at 7 p.m., the Consolidated Community Funding Advisory Committee will hold its annual hearing, which to get feedback from folks in the community on these affordable housing needs and others. It all goes in, it all feeds into material, the work that the county does related to its funding from HUD and CDBG and other funding. So it's important. I know, could someone say, Amelia, you're receiving the signups, right? Could someone from housing send everybody that announcement if they haven't? Many people have received it already because it's gone out officially, but maybe some have not. So could we make sure it goes out?
Thank you, we will. Next slide.
It has more information.
Sarah.
Pastor Walton just logged in, and he can do a much better job talking about worship in the woods than I did.
Great, and thank you for letting us know. Dr. Walton, would you state your name, that you are here, and just so we can hear you and where you're calling from?
Yes, Vernon Walton, Herndon, Virginia.
Great, and we were just talking, would you like to add, Sarah gave a brief update on Worship in the Woods. We're really grateful to you for being one of the conveners of that. Would you like to add anything?
Thank you so much. I just want to say that, first of all, I appreciate your presence, and for those who work with this particular population being there. It was a great day of worship. It was a great day of engagement and learning. For me and many others, it had a few purposes. One was to expose faith leaders in particular to our neighbors that are living in this community right next door to us. And secondly, to engage in conversation with our neighbors to attempt to understand the human dynamic and their needs and the reality that many of these individuals are working, and some, of course, have other concerns, but that they are people that need to be seen. And finally, to engage in conversation about policy and to try to help faith leaders and many in our community understand the entry points to receiving assistance with housing and understand the dynamics so that we could determine how to best serve and advocate on their behalf. So really appreciate the conversation and the dialogue. And I know that there was a document produced. I don't know if that has been shared with you as of this moment or the committee, but I'm sure it can be if it has not been.
Thank you so much, and we'll get that.
Thank you.
Thank you, and we will share that out with other materials. Thank you so much. It was really great, and I just say that the very next weekend, Dr. Walton's parish and his congregation held their annual Christmas in July, welcoming busloads of individuals from many of the homeless shelters and folks who are unhoused, and it was a wonderful day. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Quickly on other updates, and you're going to hear about these actually from our others. Joe Mandaro is going to talk a little bit about the budget as part of our budget committee report. I would note that among other notable actions, Tom's going to talk about a lot, but the resting comprehensive plan, an update to that, which was 18 months in the making when Supervisor Alcorn took office, was approved, and he noted a board matter to move with urgency to address the issues in Hunter Mill. And it referenced, of course, some of many of you have participated with the county on the site-specific plan amendment schedules, the activities around the county. So there has been a lot of activity happening, and Tom's going to cover the rest. We did want to briefly ask that Bree, who is online with us, just give an update on the preservation policy action and guidelines, because we've talked about this at a couple meetings, and it's coming up Tuesday for final action. Go ahead, Bree.
Sure. Thanks, Carrie. So we are moving forward on the administrative guidelines, which, as we've previously discussed, they help support the implementation of the preservation policy that was adopted into the comprehensive plan back in March. Since the last draft that I had presented to you all at a previous meeting, there have been minor additions and clarifications that have been suggested by the board, as well as from public feedback and members of industry. They're mainly pertaining to the rents used for determining applicability of a property that might be utilizing the policy, and the provision of preserved units off-site. And as Carrie mentioned, there is a public hearing on Tuesday for the guidelines.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments from board members, council members? Paul?
I just wanted to ask about the status of right to return. It did not look like there was a robust policy for that.
Sure. So I know we had emailed about this a little bit. The issue with the right to return is that there may be scenarios where the one-for-one replacement isn't fully achieved, since the policy is flexible. So we can't necessarily guarantee a right to return for everyone. Where there is not one-for-one replacement fully done, those situations will need to be worked through very thoughtfully as they come up on a case-by-case basis.
I agree. I sent a note to three already on these, but I just wanted to bring them up again. Two issues that are coming up in the one area. One is what happens when developers buy a property and hold it for some length of time, waiting for the land value to go up and the time to be right before development occurs, and how that affects both the committed and uncommitted affordable housing. Can they get out of any affordability commitments by doing that? And they may hold it for quite a few years. We have an instance where we think that might be happening. And also the issues of where you have a affordable, market rate affordable development at working class levels of like 700 units. We've had 2 of these come up with SFPA requests so far in the county. And clearly the new development, even though it's going to have many, many, many more, say you're going from 700 to 2,500, it's still not going to happen that they all get one-to-one replaced on site. It's just not going to be probably not going to happen. It'd be like a 20-25% affordability issue. So could you just address those 2 situations, which are both very real?
Well, for the first scenario regarding a property owner potentially purchasing a property and then holding it, we did include in the applicability for market affordable a look back at through the preceding 3 years to try and kind of avoid those situations where someone is holding it to potentially avoid the policy applying to it. So we felt that 3 years was appropriate. And I will say if they are raising rents on a market property, then they probably have to do substantial renovations as well to justify charging those higher rents. So that might prolong further, but that is something that we don't have a lot of control over unless we can get in and help supply some funding for that, in which case we'd have a little more leeway to discuss rents. But for committed affordable, I know we had discussed this by email a little bit as well. They won't be able to raise rents above a certain threshold that they're beholden to.
Madam Chairman,
Yes.
I might also add that the key to triggering the policy as well is the filing of some sort of land use application for redevelopment. So if they buy and hold the property and then 5, 7, 10 years down the road, they file a land use application that would materially affect the affordability that's on the site, then it would still be applicable regardless of the length of them holding the property.
No.
Yes.
Sorry. So I just want to make sure I understand this. I thought the purpose of the preservation amendment was to preserve housing, but if we're not going to have a one-for-one replacement, this would actually potentially lead to a net loss of affordable housing. Is that correct?
Respond to that. I think it's important to understand this policy as an additional tool for us to preserve affordability. The absence of this tool would put us further behind in terms of preserving the units. So I don't think it's accurate to characterize it as resulting in a net loss. This policy was always understood as we presented it to the board, as we worked with industry, to be applicable and to achieve one-to-one replacement
to the greatest extent possible on a case-by-case basis. That was the guidance we received from the board, and that is what the board adopted. So the guidelines are intended to implement what the board's already adopted.
Is it safe to say that as the guidelines are adopted, that this is one of the areas that we can continue to get updates on how it's working as projects come forward under this application?
Absolutely.
And I think to some of the questions and to see how this plays out and some of those issues, the right to return, Bree, thank you for that. Any other, I'm sorry, Jerry?
Yeah, I wanted to note that what was passed in the recent state budget was a requirement for any district of over 3,500 people to be part of a reporting mechanism. The question I would have is this an element that we would put into such reporting about our preservation efforts?
Thank you very much for that question as well. What Dr. Poach is referring to is legislation that effectively required and funded the State Department of Housing and Community Development to do a periodic housing needs assessment statewide. It's not terribly well defined. I'm sure you're shocked to hear that. But certainly our progress writ large relative to preservation would be a key element of what we would be reporting.
So for that account, then it would be, coming to us likely before it gets transmitted, so we would also have access to giving some additional input.
Yes.
Nick?
I don't want folks to think that this like a perfect being the enemy of the good, right? Before this policy, you could go anywhere in the county, buy a market rate affordable unit, knock all the units down, relocate all of the folks out of there and not have to replace any of them. So what this is really doing is now creating another step for developer, I don't say accountability, but bringing folks to the table who are going to do that to talk through a process to try to keep as many of the units as possible. It is largely economically infeasible to keep all of the units that exist in some of these properties as affordable and to do the new development. It just doesn't, the math just does not work unless the county's budget quadruples, and even then, it probably still doesn't work. So we need to keep kind of pushing and then maybe push a little further and keep on going. But just the fact that developers have to now go through a conversation with Megan and Bree and the team in an effort to try to keep as many as possible and then justify it kind of with math is a huge step in the right direction. I'm going through the process right now, and I promise there are a lot of questions about it. So I think it's going to work, and it's going to continue to raise the awareness that we have to try to keep these market units as much as possible. Because without it, a lot of these neighborhoods, market forces are just going to remove them. Whatever that.
Thank you. Thank you for that, Nick. I really want to thank some of them that have been a few members of AHAC, Nick, Paul, Mary, Jerry, others who have been very active in sort of bringing input to this. And I think understanding it that way and seeing, how we can continue to move forward and get to policy, because we are at that tipping point. And I know I don't want to be on the other end of conversations with Megan. That's pretty, she's tough when she's not sitting here at this table, but a great partner. I want to move on to, if I may, and there's still opportunity, look for that at Tuesday, those guidelines, so there's still opportunity to weigh in and address individual concerns. This will be something that we want to definitely pursue more in the coming work plan. I'm going to turn it over to Tom now for the director's updates.
Thank you very much. We can go to the next slide. just been very quiet at the Department of Housing lately. A few things that I'd like to highlight. We did have a housing committee meeting on the 1st of August that focused largely on the preservation guidelines. We had a robust discussion, and we also had a very significant discussion relative to our ongoing pipeline, et cetera. I'll get to that in just a moment. The Housing Authority implemented its first scholarship program, providing scholarship awards to 10 of our program participants. It was, a very good reminder of why we do the work that we do. And we were very excited to be able to use our Moving to Work Authority to be able to make that happen. We have ongoing a workforce dwelling unit task force that is working to address the income levels that are served under the forced sale component of the WDU program. We expect to wind that up very shortly and be able to report out the task force's recommendations to the board's housing committee at the end of November. I will just say that it is looking like the recommendation that will come out will include some version of removing the 120% tier and increasing the affordability at lower tiers. So stay tuned for that. With respect to legislation, I'd like to focus today just briefly at the federal level. There is an ongoing bipartisan effort to improve the low-income housing tax credit program specific to the use of private activity bonds in support of 4% tax credit projects. I think for our developer friends in the room here, they definitely understand that there's been a real run on the non-competitive 4% tax credits across the country and very acutely here in Virginia. And the legislation that is winding its way through the Hill would essentially have the requirement for private activity bonds in 4% tax credits. And the knock-on effect of that basically is it makes our bond allocations go a lot further. So I know that's fairly, pretty hyper-technical, but it is really, really important to the health and welfare of the tax credit program. Next is we have just released about 10 days ago the notice of funding availability for this year's affordable housing development and preservation funding. We have $31 million that we have put out that's going to be available. We anticipate through the carryover process, we'll talk about that a little bit more a little bit later, that there will be additional funds added, and we will amend the notice of funding availability to include those additional funds. Since we last met as well, the Board of Supervisors initiated the process to transfer additional properties to the Housing Authority for new affordable housing development, including notably the Dulles Green property in the Drainsville district, which is adjacent to the Innovation Station on the north side of the toll road, as well as the remaining component of the southeast quadrant property in the Mason district at the intersection of Columbia Pike and Route 7. We've already discussed the preservation policy and guidelines, and but before we move on to the goals, I did want to also just note a couple of things with respect to the RHA for general information. Sadly, our Springfield district representative, Mr. Feng, passed away unexpectedly. And my understanding is that his services are actually this evening. But I did want to let everyone know Mr. Feng was a passionate advocate for affordable senior housing. He was absolutely thrilled when we did our groundbreaking for the Autumn Willow project in the Springfield district. And he came to the, just days before he passed, came to the opening of the Oakwood property in the Franconia district. And we'll miss Ken a lot and his advocacy for seniors. Also, our chairman, Melissa McKenna, has resigned from the FCRHA because she's moving out of the area. And we now have a new chair, Lenore Stanton from the Sully district. So just a couple of notes there. With respect to our development activity, and we can go to the next slide here. We have, as everybody knows, we've delivered North Hill and Ovation at Arrowbrook. We've just delivered the Oakwood property, which I mentioned. That Oakwood is a project of APA, and we're very excited to have that one online. If you've driven by George Mason University recently, you've seen that one university is coming along nicely. And we expect that it'll be opening this coming summer. Braddock Senior, this is APA's development on essentially adjacent to the Erickson site, the former training center, continuing care site. They're under construction, and they actually just got an award of additional funding from the Federal Home Loan Bank of Atlanta. And Autumn Willow, as I just mentioned, is also under construction. Go on to the next slide here. A lot in our immediate pipeline. We're our own Stonegate Village property in Reston. We're preparing to do a renovation there. Telestar, which is our first true building repurposing, commercial building repurposing for affordable housing, is moving forward. Route 50 in West Docks, permanent supportive housing, that's the Cornerstones project. We are resolving some easement issues there, and hope to be moving forward shortly. The delivery of the new Little River Glen and the renovation of the existing original section of Little River Glen, we expect to close on the financing in the spring and be underway by early next summer. We have a small project at Dominion Square West, and that one is we expect to close the financing in this December. So we're about 90 days away from that. That will include the 516 units of affordable housing, including 100 deeply affordable units with project-based vouchers, as well as a 30,000 square foot Fairfax County Community Center. So we're excited about that one. Somos at McLean is another large affordable housing project that we have that is going to be closing at McLean Metro. We expect to close the financing on that one early next year. The evocatively named Residences at the Government Center Part 2 is, I'm sure that our friend Mr. Bracco will come up with a better name than I did. They've been awarded their 9% tax credits for the first phase. We expect to be moving forward very shortly. And real excited about that one here. We've got affordable housing in our backyard. Now we will very much have it in our front yard too. The redevelopment of the former Eleanor Kennedy shelter in the Pendon neighborhood is going to include about 60 to 65 units of new affordable housing. So that's in design.
Franconia Government Center redevelopment. We are preparing for the land use process there. That's 120 units. Tara and our friends at Wesley are moving very much forward on the permanent supportive housing. Camilla, Tara, this is going to be a good one, and we are really, really pleased to be doing this in partnership with the city. And the Housing Authority is providing, I believe it is 50 project-based vouchers for that project as well. And then finally, in another leap of faith, we are developing with Wesley Housing 95 new senior units on the campus at First Christian Church, and we're looking forward to getting that one underway. So this is our immediate pipeline. We've got a lot moving forward. I'll pause there, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Just forgive my lack of knowledge, but Stonegate is going to be updated. Will that be a one-to-one, or are they knocking things down?
Stonegate it's going to be renovated as it is, but it's a full-on, it's going to be a gut renovation like we just did down at Murray Gate a couple years ago.
Yeah, so I'll just give my perennial comment that in our full meetings that the communication of this work really can be enormously valuable to those of us who want to advocate. And I'm talking about visual communication of the work, because it leads to the public becoming far more supportive. You know, the word housing development can create in people's mind, you know, those huge monstrosities from the 1960s that were blown up and torn down. And it's for those people as opposed for us people. And I think it's up to, you know, I know, Tom, you're limited in your own resource base in this domain, but I still would urge us to think creatively. How could people at either Northern Virginia Community College or in George Mason in the communication departments partner with us to lift up in a visually charismatic way an enormous return on investment that the community is gathering from this? I think it's a force multiplier, in my humble opinion, for us to build political goodwill for doing more.
Yes, absolutely, Jerry. And I think one of the things, just to say, we want to take this, one of the reasons wanted to put this on the slide, we also talked about making sure that we have, you know, the speaker's notes for you all on the affordability, the number of units where they're affordable. So I pledged we're working on that to continue to update and to spur that on. We're doing a GMU capstone project right now, and it's something similar, and I think that's a great idea. I want to go to Dr. Vincent, who is on the phone.
Tom, I just wanted to say you guys are not busy at all, but thank you for such a comprehensive summary. We know this is all happening behind the scenes. You know, it's been very exciting to see the influx of development of affordable housing in Fairfax County. Very exciting to see the plans and where we're headed. I want to provide feedback from some of the folks who are directly benefiting from this, some of the housing that's been procured through this process. I know that recently we got feedback, and this came directly from our Consumer Advisory Council. And one of the things that they put on the table, actually they asked the question that I think I've raised in this room sometimes, which is affordable for whom? From where they're sitting, and for those people with the experience, lived experience of not just homelessness, but of having disabilities and living on a fixed income, they sometimes see themselves as not being included in the proliferation of the housing that we have, exploding throughout Fairfax County. So the question, and I'm gonna preface that by saying we know that they're set aside. So I think it's 20%. There's a 20% set aside for each of these developments for those to be for folks at 50% and below. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but just want to put that out there that this continues to be an area of concern and interest coming directly from those people who are benefiting from these. And I think it's also an area of concern and interest for those of us who are advocating for continuing development of affordable housing, but housing that's truly affordable for people in that missing middle, as we're referring to them. So those folks who are at 30% and below, and not necessarily 50% and above. So very long-winded comments, but I guess my basic question is, of the 2,100 units that we're looking at, what percentage would you say is being set aside for those folks who are in that 30% and below AMI category? And thank you once again for all the work that you do.
Dr. Vincent, thank you for that. I learned long ago not to attempt to do math in public. So I'll defer on guessing a percentage, but a couple things that I want to say is that we have on our to-do list to provide for the council a breakout of the units in our pipeline by relative to affordability. So that is something that we owe the council and that we need to come back and bring to you so that you can see that. Second, though, I'll also say that we hear very clearly that concern, and in response, what we are trying to do is to be very aggressive in deploying the housing authorities moving to work authority to include project-based vouchers and substantial amounts of project-based vouchers in as many of these projects as we possibly can. So, for example, the Dominion Square project of the 516 units, as I mentioned, we're going to have 100 of them are going to have project-based vouchers. Similarly, the permanent supportive housing properties will, almost all of them have a substantial number of project-based vouchers. They really can't function without them. And that's setting aside even the issue of the services, which we've also discussed. But even among the many other projects that we're working on, we are working to deploy PBVs there as well to ensure that we're truly serving a mix of incomes, including those with the deepest affordability needs.
Thank you, Tom. We so appreciate it, and we know you're doing the best that you can with what you have. So thank you.
Thank you. Jill?
Yeah, thank you, really, and staff, amazing job. It's so exciting to see the pipeline and appreciate all the hard work going into that. So just a few comments back to Jerry. NAHAC really is trying to help with the communication side of just promoting all of the amazing work that's been done by our development partners here in the room and otherwise. So happy to kind of connect with you on that, how we can make that more robust and impactful. But that is part of what we're trying to do, share that great news of our successes. And just really want to echo Eleanor's comments, as we really all are feeling that pinch for our clients that you all are serving as rents are rising, even within our tax credit properties, and owners need to take those higher rents to maintain these amazing buildings. But yeah, all that we can do to kind of ensure that we're serving that missing, because we know we have a mismatch between people's incomes and the affordability here in Fairfax County and across the region. So happy to try to be a partner with you on that. But yeah,
I just would add, even the scholarship winners become charismatic people who can convince the rest of us this is for our future, right? They're on their escalator up academically, but they're also coming from a public housing base that validates the importance of that base. And, you know, I think all older people like me love to hear younger people talk about their journey into their fuller, richer adult life. And I think that's, again, another positive reinforcement. So, you know, I think our goodness that's already been laid out here provides the template for the broader public education and public goodwill, especially during an election year and into a first-year terms for people who will be elected.
Really briefly to that point, I wanted to note that we are as an agency making progress relative to how we communicate about our successes. That has been a long-term challenge for us, and long-term meaning decades long. We have a new communications manager on board and are making significant strides in that respect as well. So I think it's all of us together, everything that's been mentioned about communications together that's going to make all the difference in the world in that respect.
Mary?
Yeah, Tom, I'm curious, you've had a couple openings recently for project-based vouchers for people to apply and be kind of pre-cleared for. Just wondering how many applications you got in of people who met the pre-clearance criteria.
I don't know off the top of my head. I know that the traffic was very high.
Right.
Very high. And what Mary's referring to is that we opened the project-based voucher waiting list for 1 week, and it was for the brand new PBVs that we have at North Hill. We have some at the Arden, which is one of Wesley's new, almost brand new projects. We had at the Arden and at Arrowbrook, I think it is. So, I'm sure that, the ratio of applicants to opportunity is going to be very high. So, but I don't, I'm sorry, I don't have the number off the top of my head.
Quick question.
Go ahead.
I can carry it. Just for clarification, I have some all the heads that are out here. What's your consistent percent AMI for the units listed? All these.
So everything that we do has an average income served of 60% of AMI or below. For example, the permanent supportive housing, projects will have, much lower average income served.
Okay. And I'm not sure if others would find this helpful. Would it be useful to include in the list the total units of each development, just as comparison of, how many versus the number of affordable units versus.
Those are totals.
Those are totals. Okay, so that's the entire. Okay, right. Thank you.
Josh, you win the prizes, the member, you spoke about, the rest of us don't stop, but no, that we are planning, again, as Tom said, it's really important that we understand the makeup of those and can answer these questions, and I think this has come up, again and again, and Tom, I don't even know if you all know, just on we were so pleased that one of our residents was one of the scholarship winners. I don't know. And it just speaks to Jerry's point, and we've had a lot of input and feedback, and Jeremy, your experience as a homeowner under the program, that's going to be so important to keep those voices. So staff have been busy, and this is just since our June meeting over the summer, some of the communications, and we can't thank you enough. We're going to move forward to the next item, and I did, that's a Carrie mistake, duplicate. We're just going to keep going. There we go. In your packet, you can go back to this slide. Thanks so much, Malia. In your packet, you're going to see an email from school board member Abrar Umesh, who is not able to join us, but I believe her chief of staff may be with us today. And if you haven't had a chance to look at this, she has proposed presenting a resolution to the school board. This is the including, you can see the now therefore be it resolved, but it's a wonderful, the full proclamation is in your packet, speaking to sort of the needs for every child deserving a safe, stable, nurturing, and nourishing environment to call home. And we know this so well, but I think this is possibly one of the first times I've seen the school board really take action, a school board member, to bring this forward. Syed, I don't know who's on the call. Would you like to say anything?
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. So this is something I would credit this council for inspiring Ms. Umesh to bring forth this proclamation. And so in sharing this proclamation, we want to ensure that we're covering all topics. So if you, as you're reading through this draft, feel free to provide any suggestions, any edits, anywhere we can expand the language to be more inclusive. And then we would love to circle back to talk about how we can galvanize additional school board member support to bring this forth for a resolution and to highlight the needs.
Wonderful. I am pretty positive whether there are any tweaks to numbers or information that we have. I'm sure it's pretty well done, that this council would endorse this concept. And I want to put it on the table before discussion that the Affordable Housing Advisory Council endorse this proclamation, this resolution, and support its adoption by the school board, and also communicate with the Board of Supervisors. Is there a second? Marlene?
Well, no, I have a question.
I want to second, and that will, thank you, Cookie, and then Jerry, and then Marlene.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think when I met with Abrar Syed and a staff person from FCPS who focuses in on the 2,100 homeless children in our school system, one of the other topics that we talked about is not only us doing an endorsement of a final product, but also going to the school board and having somebody from AHAC express our strong support for this, because I think we want to build a stronger web of relationships within the FCPS system. And sadly, Abrar will not be a member of the school board after January. I hope she still stays with us in some capacity, but we will need to add new threads of relationships to FCPS.
Marlene.
I was just puzzled. I think I totally support it, and I think it's excellent, and I'm very proud that Abrar has brought this to the school board. The question I have is the use of houselessness versus homelessness, and it does both. In other words, the title is houseless, which sounds funny. And then in the body of the resolution, it slips back to homelessness on occasion. I know it's their resolution, and far be it for me to tell them what language to use, but I was wondering if there's a reason for using houselessness. Because generally, I think the reason we talk, and everybody else talks about homelessness, is because folks don't necessarily all live in houses. They live in, homes can be, there's a lot of, homes is a bigger, attaches more, encompasses more possibilities than a house does. Yes. So, I just.
Maybe unsheltered.
Well, I don't know. I don't know why I don't know what the rationale was for using that, but Thomas, our expert, maybe you have
Do you know why they, Tom, do you know why they?
If I can approach
Approach the bench.
Hi, everyone. Tom Barnett in the Department of Housing, Deputy Director responsible for the Office to Prevent End Homelessness. This is an eternal debate. Over the past year, though, I have seen this more debated than usual. I think there's a growing trend of using the word unhoused because we want to talk about how the solution is housing, right? And so I think it also avoids this stigma that comes with the word homeless, as it's been for decades used to describe and define people, right? I tend to lead with a people first language, borrowing from language of the disability rights community, and that their status as housed or unhoused doesn't define them. They're people first. Even the word unhoused now is starting to be spun because it's often accompanied by unhoused and unhinged. This is something we'll see
Oh my goodness.
So, and I would just add, I'd recommend checking out the invisible.tv. It's a nonprofit that really puts the camera on people who are experiencing homelessness and hears directly from them. And over the summer, they talked about how many of the people he interviewed preferred the word homeless because they were like, stop trying to spin this into something that it's not. You know, I identify as homeless, and let's not just mince words. I need
Yeah.
So I wish I had a definitive answer to what's the right solution. I think it's going to be a debate for a long time, but I think leading with people and talking about it truthfully and honestly is the best you can do.
I'm not quibbling with that, of course, about the sentiments or the feelings and the philosophy, the approach that's taken. It's just that it struck me as being awkward.
That the language becomes very cumbersome.
Yeah, that's all. But,
Thank you, Tom. I think the ask from our colleague was to provide her with some input and feedback, and Ms. I will take that back. But aside from, that wordsmithing and finalizing the document, do we want to move forward on action on this resolution? Jerry?
So with the comments already delivered about language refinement, I think I would propose that we support the resolution.
Definitely. I second. So, right. All right. Perhaps vote on the comment.
The only final thing I'll say is I always return to the Frameworks Institute's guidance on how best to communicate effectively for what we're trying to achieve. And they will prefer that we use the word home as opposed to housing. And, that's always a good guide because they are the most studied group that I know of looking at the impact of language in advancing social good.
And in terms of those wonderful comments, may I, all in favor, supporting the motion? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Great, then it goes forward, and I know Jerry and others, we will communicate and go back. Thank you so much, Syed, for joining us. Now we are going to move to our the committee reports, and we're just going to go in order and turn it over to Mr. Mandoro first.
Thank you. So a couple things about the current status of our budget discussion. Obviously, it's in the context of ultimately moving toward that baseline funding for the development preservation housing. But as we transition to that, we're continuing to focus on those opportunities that exist for putting in place additions to, as Tom indicated, NOFA and other of the opportunities that are available to us of county dollars. Carryover is the current opportunity. As you saw probably in the package, thank you, Carrie and team, for setting that out. The chairman, Supervisors Palchik, Faust, Alcorn, and Lusk put forward a consideration item, carryover for $8 million consistent with what they've done for a number of third quarters and carryovers, again, to provide funding during the course of the year in anticipation ultimately at baseline funding. The board had a budget committee meeting on Tuesday. There were no questions about the consideration item. I think probably good news. The board will take action next Tuesday, this coming Tuesday, on the full carryover package. The consideration items, just as a sort of sidebar, are the board's opportunity to make changes to the county executive's proposed package, not the advertised budget, the third quarter package, carryover package. And so board members bring forward consideration items for the rest of their colleagues to consider as they're making final decisions on the action. So after a public hearing on Tuesday, the board will act, and hopefully there'll be another $8 million for ACD to go up. A couple of other things that are going on specific to carryover. One of the discussions that Mary and others have led is how we can get to sort of our new baseline as relates to rent relief. Given the fact that we were fortunate during COVID to have many, many dollars flowing to rent relief at a time when there was significant need. Now those dollars are no longer available to us, and what will we have as our sort of new baseline for this year, and I think just importantly for the 2025 and forward budget. There was some conversation again at last Tuesday's committee meeting, and some interest, a lot of interest by the board to continue the conversation, to understand clearly where the numbers are in terms of the need, and understand the assumptions that are going into sort of the county's response to that number of months to provide assistance, et cetera. And so there'll be some conversations, I think, at Human Service Committee and other forums to advance that. As staff indicated, there are opportunities later in the fiscal year to add funding to the issue of rent relief. And so it's not ended here, it's just sort of taken on a new phase. There also was a communication a week ago, not Friday, from staff updating the board and the community about where we are with the allocation of federal dollars that came to the county through COVID, CARES Act, and others. I know Marlene's probably read the whole document. It's a pretty sizable one. One point for this group is that it acknowledged the fact that over the course of the last number of months, $25 million in additional federal dollars have been allocated to housing, most of which we already knew about, but nice to have it validated and in the document and flowing to specific project needs. Sections of it. The last thing I just mentioned as an add-on to the list of upcoming Board of Supervisors meetings as we pivot and look towards fiscal 25, sort of the first the most significant next step in that discussion will be the joint school board of supervisors budget meeting on November 28th. There are a number of other meetings of interest for us on that date. It's at 3 o'clock, and staff from both the county and schools will present the updated forecasts, which will help us sort of frame the conversation for 25 commitment to affordable housing and support services, et cetera, that we need to have accompany them.
Questions? Mary, comments?
I just had a comment. I think Carrie's going to circulate later a memo from 3 organizations, Ventures in Community, which is a faith-based organization, the South County Task Force, which is a policy activist organization, and Fairfax NACP, asking for more rent relief. We thought we had a common understanding last spring that we were going to ramp down the amount of rent, utility, and legal services relief to a higher base. That was the conversation last spring. And what we found was that it was almost cut in half in the FY24 budget from the FY23. And we thought that was too steep of a cut. My rationale for that is in the memo that we sent the board. So I would really encourage any folks who are concerned about that, who deal with the very poorest folks who are in need of rent relief and eviction court, maybe see me and we'll we'll keep advocating for that because we think it's a real need.
Could I just add another point I'd like to make, just so we don't lose it? One of the major tasks that the Budget Committee had not taken on yet, but we have on our plate to take on is, because we've been focusing really on public dollars, looking at other opportunities, philanthropic, et cetera, to help float funds to affordable housing broaden even more. So we will be taking that on.
Right, Arlene? Related to the thinking ahead to the coming fiscal year, the next fiscal year, 25. What do you think the chances are that the county will do a real human services resource guide? In other words, not what we had. It was revolved. Well, and accompanied by a needs assessment, a real needs assessment. Because many of us have been talking about rent relief and eviction prevention and all of that. It's hard. It's very hard to get a handle on the numbers of people who are affected, who have been or could be affected. And the needs assessment, a solid human services needs assessment, not just on this issue, but on other human services issues, whether it's housing or food, needs for food or medical care or health care or whatever it is, or child care, is really important. And it's not just for the advocates, but for people who are doing the planning and including the elected officials. And we don't have a handle on it anymore. And the needs assessment leads right, a good solid needs assessment goes right into a resource guide. We need to know, we had one for a while, it was robust. Things changed during COVID, understandably. What we had last year was not really a resource guide. And what do you think? I mean, do you think there's any chance that that's going to happen again, that we're going to get it again, and that the community might be involved in developing it the way we were the first time?
Recognizing there are not officials anymore to that conversation, I do think that it is very reasonable. And I think, first of all, that staff heard the concern about the change last year and the fact that it was not as robust, perhaps, as some of the previous exercises, nor as had been indicated we're moving towards, which I think is sort of the key, that we had always anticipated that the resource plan would continue to evolve and expand. It had not gotten to sort of the level that was originally anticipated. That said, a lot has changed since that original plan. So I do think at this point, a conversation, whether it's led by the Human Service Council or us and them, or some combination, requesting some dialogue about what the plan is, and if there are opportunities to make it more robust, to have it meet some of the specific things that are missing, now's the time to do it, and I think that's the avenue to take.
Thanks. Oh, Jerry?
Yeah, so not disagreeing with anything, as a Human Service Council rep here, we'll certainly take this feedback back to the Human Services Council, but I'll also be pursuing Chris Leonard for a broader conversation on how do we organize better for the coming year. Also, though, I wanted to raise the point with you and what your thoughts might be. We have a need to broaden the basis of revenue into the county. The perennial, but yet to be successful, meals tax needs to be conceived of within the electoral cycle. The first year of an election, raising taxes might be the only possibility to be done, and that's next year. Those are big questions that we have some responsibility, not just to say, Tom, do more, but also figure out where are we going to get the resources from in order to get more done. And you did say you had high hopes for some LIHTC reform at the federal level being able to help us. We want to pursue that in the legislative agenda for the federal side, but we also want to think more broadly, how could we get more empowerment fiscally at the local level?
Thank you. Joe, go.
So I think you're absolutely right relative to the timing and relative to sort of the opportunity that doesn't exist all of the years of board sitting. I will say, and not to read too much into this, but the board was very clear in their budget guidance to staff as part of last year's budget that they wanted, and board referenced this on Tuesday, a really comprehensive look, certainly as always at the expenditure side of things, and we've heard sort of what direction that's going in, but also on the revenue side and what opportunities exist for that perennial diversification conversation. But again, I think perhaps in this part of the cycle, better opportunity for things to be explored that at other points maybe are not palatable. I think that in order for that to happen, the pressure needs to continue to be applied, but it does seem like there's some intentionality there.
I'm going to go to Paul.
Just so, in terms of the rental assistance programs, I know there was the ERA program, and now there's the ERA Rich funding that is being used. Is that what is considered being refunded or extended? Or
So there we go. So the funds that flowed during COVID were from a number of multiple sources, but they were all, other than the baseline county funding, viewed as not permanent. Recognizing, as Mary said, that in 23 we had sort of a level of funding of about $14.4 million that was much higher than the traditional baseline, but much lower than what we've spent the last few years. There needed to be sort of an evaluation of what the new level going forward was. That's driven obviously by need, but also by program design parameters in terms of how many months are capable eligible, et cetera. Where we've landed, as I would say, and as I think was expressed very clearly by Chris Leonard on Tuesday, tentatively at this point, is a level of funding of $7.7 million for fiscal 24. Some of that is still federal funding. And so there are sort of two questions, I think. One is, what is the new baseline level? And then second, once we've identified that, how is the gap between what's current general fund baseline and that number met? I think will need to be met with additional general fund commitment in 25 and any number of one-time dollars in 24. But it's kind of both sides of the equation. That answers the question.
yeah, just to be clear, this is what is distributed when people call in and say if they need rental assistance.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I think this will, continue. This will be an important part of our work plan that I do want to get to for this meeting. We do this all the time. Joe, just thank you. Ava, some of us have been talking about how in some of the meetings just about how having you as part of this council, taking us through understanding the budget process, the opportunities, it's just been great. It's taken a lot of the fear out of going to the budget hearings and talking about it, but also the mystery out of what goes on behind the scenes. And I know we all are grateful to you, for your leadership. I'm sure I told you I wasn't going to name names, but we were commenting on how much that really helped. I'm also going to now move to Jerry for a brief update on legislation.
I'm going to try to be very brief. You have two items in your packet. The one is a August 9th memo that came from Kerry to Chairman McKay and members of the board, focusing on our initial recommendations for the state legislative policy and a little bit on federal. So look at that. It's something that reflected a deeper conversation at our June meeting, particularly around raising the cap for us to get bonded for future projects. So it has within there a number of items that we discussed. But also this week, the Boards of Supervisors Legislative Committee met, and we got our first look at the draft legislative policy packet that will be evolving through November, eventually to be approved by the Boards of Supervisors in December. And the matter on housing are extracted and available for you to peruse there. Clearly, there's more work to be done in this arena, and there's more work to be thought of as the Governor Youngkin's first biennial budget is proposed in 2024. Of course, he hasn't given me his inside features on what he's going to do for housing. I remain ever hopeful. But once that does become revealed, then it changes the landscape of advocacy in substantive ways. So we have to be watchful, is all I would say. And then the last issue I just wanted to raise is each of us is empowered, not on behalf of AHAC, but in our everyday lives with the most important electoral year out of 4. So we have the opportunity to meet with people running as delegates, as senators, as members of the board. And it's up to us, I think, collectively to use that engagement to bring all the wealth of knowledge that we gain from our meetings about the importance of the affordability of housing. Most will not command the knowledge base that we have. There definitely will be 2 new members of the Boards of Supervisors in the coming year, so the plan of engagement from those 2 magisterial districts is going to be really important. But there could be a 3rd one as well. So I just lift that up for all of us because we have an opportunity to be watchful on our own and speaking out on our own. It's not an AHAC function, but I think our leadership here is clear from just the skill sets that we reveal to each other about ourselves, just urging us to be watchful and speaking up to the greatest extent possible. Happy to answer any questions.
Just a quick sort of corollary to that. They also included, this is a holdover from last year, in their budget, in the board's earlier in that document, the legislative package, under budget priorities, which is good because we asked for us to be a priority. They did the last bullet under, I think it's the last bullet. Anyway, but bullet at the bottom of page 5 says support state funding and actions, including enhancing and creating more state-funded housing tax credit and rental assistance programs to increase the availability of affordable, accessible, and integrated housing options, particularly in high-cost of living areas like West Virginia, and to mitigate evictions following from the economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic. This particular section says to be updated in a future draft. But I was pleased to see that it still is much a priority, so that's good. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Jerry, and everybody that's worked with that. And the next legislative committee meeting is coming up on October 3rd. I know Jerry's going to be watching. We all will, and a chance to influence that document. And as the county executive said to me, Jerry and I talk to him a lot, but the person he really hears is Mary Payton. I really want to, we all left, and everyone knows Mary and the work you do. And Mary chaired our Fair Housing Committee, and she is here today. And also, Evan, if you want to come up to the table, Evan Graff, who Mary will start us off, and then Evan.
Yeah, folks, as you recall, maybe, we recommended, and the ICP recommended to the Board of Supervisors when it approved the Council of Governments Fair Housing Goals and the Fairfax County Fair Housing Goals, July 25th. That they continue with two issues, 2 items. One item was to somehow have open process to prioritize the goals. Previously, we had many goals, and there was kind of a lack of someone to drive forward the ones that were most important and could have the most impact. And we see that as I have participated with the Council of Government Fair Housing group over the last 2 years, I could see coming from HUD, the new guidelines are actually calling on jurisdictions to do that rather than to just have fair housing as another paperwork burden that they have to fill out what we did on this goal and that goal and the other goal, but rather to say, hey, these are the goals we think are most effective, this is why, and to really push them forward, make some progress, and review them, and then maybe change over other goals as progress is made on it. So there were 2 things we recommended. One is that we have this goal and push it forward, and 2 is that we have an administrative mechanism that would make that happen. And we realized it had to be at the county executive level because all of the goals involve 4 different departments. And the code is siloed until they get to the county executive level. Not that they don't cooperate on many things, but to drive something, you need something at that level. So I'm very happy to meet Evan Brandt. He called me. He said he is at the county executive level, and he is doing that. So we had a very lovely meeting, and I'd like to introduce him to talk to all of you. Yeah.
Thank you, Mary. I think it's been about 4 weeks ago, so I'm still in my learning curve around fair housing. That I was asked to kind of step in and provide county executive leadership around fair housing. I work out of the county executive's office. I'm our countywide coordinator, and my role is to accelerate, elevate, and increase collaboration around county-wide priorities, and definitely fair housing is an area where I think we have to accelerate and elevate that work. I really want to thank Carrie for just helping me with my learning curve, and Mary. I know there's been a lot of shout outs to her today, but she has been wonderful in these first 4 weeks because my background, 26 of my 28 years career in the county, has been in human services, but I still have a lot of learning to do as it relates to fair housing. So, Mary, thank you. It's the stuff she's sending me is really helping to accelerate my learning and the approaches we think about here in the county. I do want to just talk about a few things just in the short time that I've been doing this work is I think providing some clarity around which county agency is actually leading this work. And so, you know, I've been real clear to folks that the Office of Human Rights and Equity Programs is the lead agency. And I know the county end, we probably haven't been doing the best job we can in regards to articulating who the lead agency is. So right now, the work that I've been doing, Amanda Scheller, who's not here today, she's on lead. Her and I are co-leading the work going forward. And I think first area that we're starting is around the fair housing plan. And so I think there's a recognition that there needs to be more meat and specificity in that plan. And Marley, I'm going to use your word. I heard it. It needs to be a lot more robust in regards to just how we're going to initiate things, the specificity about that, who's assigned to actually do what is our short-term, mid-term, and long-term range goals, and really also talking about the accountability piece. What is success going to look like, and how are we going to report that out? I've heard some of that today, this accountability piece, and our champions and our stakeholders wanting to know the progress that we're making. So we just kicked off this week pulling together a county-wide group of staff that are now working on that plan. In my role, it's to kind of accelerate that work and make sure we get it done. Sometimes I want things to go a lot quicker, but have to recognize that process really matters. We are going to be coming back hopefully in December to really talk about where we are with that plan and what we've done to kind of accelerate it. And so I'm really looking forward to that. And then I do think Mary's comments about how we can better engage our community champions and our stakeholders is one that I think has to be critical to this work ahead. So I definitely know as we look at creating this robust plan and adding some specificity to it, we are going to be coming back and getting feedback, making sure we are going in the right direction and that we haven't missed anything that's important. So I just want to thank you for allowing me to be here today and look forward to working with everybody. Great.
Can I just make a quick comment? Hallelujah. It's welcome. And just because I always stick my 2 cents in, I hope, and I have no knowledge of this, that you will engage the Disability Services Board and the disability community, because often in my experience that it's an add-on. And once it's an add-on, the game is over. It's just too late. And I know, and I can, I don't know if you heard, I represent the Disability Services Board as well as a community member in the larger committee. And I'm happy to coordinate that for you or tell you who to talk to if you need that. And we would welcome involvement. Second of all is just one word: enforcement. And I worked with Mary on fair housing, and we, a lot of committee members went back and forth, and enforcement is a key issue that seems to be not robust. And so I look forward, all of us look forward to working with you on that. And thank you. Welcome.
And I will just say this, my passion is therapeutic recreation. So I spent about, I think, a good 8 years overseeing our therapeutic recreation services. So disability services is very close to my heart, and look forward to connecting with you and seeing how we can work together.
Thanks, Evan. Mary, I think that's just a great segue, hearing from our committee chairs and the work that each of you has been involved in. I think shows that AHAC is making a difference. We've made some progress and we're seeing it here. If we can, Aaliyah, if you can take us to the next slide. And this is to really focus on, for the next few minutes in our agenda, because we've done it again. And I am going to get you out of here on time. I want to just bring it back to when we started this journey as the newly rechartered Affordable Housing Advisory Council. We developed a work plan, because you got to, plan the work and work a plan. And we did develop a work plan taken from the strategies that came out of the community-wide housing strategic plan, the recommendations of the Affordable Housing Resource Panel. And we came up with 4 areas, about a 20-page huge chart. But the 4 areas that we talked about, of course, were the production and preservation, legislation, policy and budget, housing in all places, which is increasingly important, as we've talked a lot today around issues of intersectionality and sort of the equity piece. And then this idea of communications, what is our role there? And we had identified some outcome measures and sort of talking about how did we get started, because there's so much to boil this ocean and what was our role. Lee, if you can go to the next slide. And just in one strategy area around production and preservation, of course, we used as our starting place the county adopted goals. That's been updated, because when we started it's at 5,000 and now it says 10,000. And we're going to keep pushing, yes, Jerry, until it says 60 for and against. But it, again, reflects the board's recognition, adoption, and championing the work. And certainly, as we heard from Tom's report, sort of how we're moving forward. Preservation was sort of an untapped, we didn't know as much about it, and we continue, and even the conversation today, and sort of beginning to understand the role, how we can work with FCRJ and zoning and others, but that was one of the goals. Malia, if you can go to the next slide. But I think what we did in the end in a March meeting, and I think it was 22, 21, I can't remember now, 22, we adopted, we looked at everything in our plan. We had, up front, I mentioned was based on the housing plan. Those of you that remember the housing strategic plan had an appendix of 25 actions in 4 categories that include things like home ownership that we've heard a little bit about today, the home ownership opportunities, special needs, and special needs populations, certainly looking at the blueprint as it works for special needs, vulnerable populations, people experiencing homelessness, commercial repurposing. We were involved in some of that, repurposing commercial buildings, and we just heard about the Telestar group, and I know Reston Strong and AHC have another plan coming forward. But we have all of these issues on the table and where to start, and we decided to start with really what you just heard from our 3 committees today. Where could we have an impact? First of all, because if we don't have the resources and not just the funding, but the commitment for the staff and not just in HCD to get the work done, but also across the board. One of the key recommendations that came out of the Affordable Housing Resource Panel was this concept of housing in all places. And if we are not aligning and working with the Planning and Zoning Department and others to ensure that if Nick's got a project that really cleverly named Residents at Government Center 2, if Nick has a project but and housing's working, if we haven't worked through all the departments that touch that, we get bogged down, we get behind, and those are some of the issues that came up. So I want to say that in our first couple of years, we really did try to, move forward and focus on a couple of these issues, and clearly you just heard from Fair Housing. I'll give a shout out to, again, Dr. Eleanor Vincent, John Boylan, who couldn't be with us today, who chaired, and with Tom Barnett and Maura Williams, who is the current chair of the Continuum of Care, really moved us forward at a time understanding the issues of homelessness and worked on a separate plan when the Board of Supervisors, the board matters came forward asking for a report. How can we prioritize the housing for the most vulnerable? And a lot of work from people here went into that. And that committee, that task force met and did a lot of work. So we've had, I think, some good work going forward. And now here we are, if you'll go to the next slide, as we move forward, trying to think, where do we go from here? What's going to remain, the most important things? And I've had the opportunity since over the summer to speak. I've been reaching out, and if I haven't caught up with you yet, you will be hearing from me, trying to speak with AHAC members, really to understand, one, what you have to contribute, the experience, how you feel about your process, and the role that we all can play individually, but more importantly, as a committee, as a council. We talked a lot. For those that I've talked about, there's been a lot about process, how these meetings are conducted. We are a large group. How can we stay on target? And with thanks for everybody for putting up with the volunteer nature of your co-chairs and moving forward. But I've got some good recommendations from people on that. A real clear need for us to focus, as we did on those 3 areas, the need to identify those issues for the 2024 calendar year and the FY 2025 to really focus. And we know budget is going to continue to be a big one, but what are those other areas from our work plan that we really haven't attached? Where can we learn more? And then how do we've heard it all day, how can the communications with the Board of Supervisors, that's our job, to recommend and to report to them, but how does that translate out through other boards, authorities, and commissions? And Malia, can you go to the next slide? And so what we are proposing is that, and for this to work, we're going to have to be disciplined, and some of you are going to have to help in between and work with us to get ready, but to use our December 15th meeting as more of a working meeting. One of the process questions that came up is, there's so much information, some people don't feel comfortable, but we could be in smaller working groups to kind of set the plan that would allow us to catch up on some of the key areas. So we want to do some breakouts at the next meeting to identify and prioritize those actions for 2024. And again, we've heard it, the November elections are going to change a lot, not just here. The chairman of the board housing committee is retiring, so there'll be a new chair for the housing committee of the board, which could change the opportunities for how we engage with that committee and sort of move things forward. Sorry, I don't know how this thing is beeping. But also at the state level, as Jerry talked about, clearly we've seen here with the opportunities, members from our BACs to have broader engagement and to go back and really connect to move things forward. And I think Abrar's opportunity to really connect us with the school board is an excellent example. So those are things we'd like to try to consider in our communications and focus in on some of those things that we haven't yet gotten to the bottom of, and some of the financing opportunities and new revenue opportunities and how we work and how is planning and zoning, how do we interface with them. So that's a recommendation for our December meeting, and we'll follow up with that. And then before we leave this, I just wanted to note that, again, in some of the conversations that we've had, I've had some recommendations from people of other individuals or organizations, initiatives that we would like to hear from. And so we will work that into our planning to have these experts come in, the intersection with climate, environment, the YIMBY group. Tom and Megan and I have had some conversations again about filling some of the vacant slots and some new folks who we need to be getting involved. So So that's it on the work plan, sort of where we want to head for between now and December. It's going to come more quickly than we realize. So I'll be reaching out to you as Tom and I think about how to organize that so we can take our work. In the meantime, the legislative committee will be moving forward. Joe's going to continue to help us think about those opportunities. And I thank you all for your service. And, while you're here, you can go pay your car taxes, you can get a tax vote, and you can vote. So with that, I would, is there any new business? Let me go to the final slide on there. And you can keep going. Is there any other business for and go to the final area? There you go.
Are these additional slides that we had on our, can we get them? Are they available on our website?
They're going to be available on our website.
Great. Okay, good. Thank you.
That's excellent. Mary.
Yeah, I just have an announcement, speaking of voting early or late. NACP belongs to a countywide coalition of groups that deal with smart growth, land use, environment, affordable housing, equity, et cetera. And this group has put together a bunch of survey questions, interviews with all of the board of supervisor candidates. And they answered the questions, and we also translated them into Spanish, and they're all available online. It's a nonpartisan group. It's called Fairfax Healthy Community. Carrie sent out the link to them, but it's a great thing to send out to people that you might want to show how the different supervisor candidates come down on the different questions on affordable housing. Affordable housing is the first set of questions. So share it with your friends and neighbors.
Thank you. People are going to start blocking me. Any other comments for the day? Thank you for staying late, and so thank you all. Are we will adjourn? Good on that. So thank you. Go forth and prosper and get an umbrella.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.